Hello everyone, Joe Kane here from Joe Rocks Coronado. Welcome to another episode. I've got a blank rock here and I'm going to show you the whole process for painting one of my All That Glitters series. This is going to be a Golden Sun Mandala, and I've got some new paints here that are by Jaquard and they're called Lumiere. And they're actually an acrylic paint. They're metallic, and I'm looking forward to seeing how they look. I've tried them on one other rock a little bit, and they turned out pretty cool looking, so I'm going to do some here. So to get this started, I'm going to start by using my little rotating platform here to get a nice blended circle in the middle, and then I'll paint the mandala design on top of that. So I get everything set up here, get my brush out. For this type of work, I like to use this kind of a stiff brush because I'm really just dragging that paint across the rock as the platform spins. So thinking hard about what I want to use here. So I'm going to start with gold in the middle. And this is a big rock, so I'm going to put a pretty good amount, maybe even a little bit more. Because once you start dragging it across the surface of a dry rock, it actually thins out pretty quickly. This is fairly thick acrylic paint, but it does thin out, and it's got to spread over a large surface. That's a little rose gold I just added there, and then a little bit more. I'm trying to go in gradients of the gold and stuff, and then a little bit of this green. It's very it almost has a gold sheen to it. That's part of the metallic thing, and I've got a couple different shades here. So I'm just trying to select colors that are going to blend together nicely as I move them around. Now, as far as where I'm putting those dots, I put them at different spots on the rock because as the rock is spinning, some of those areas, if you don't have some kind of spread out around the rock, they won't get good coverage. So from the center, you can put them pretty much right in close to the center there, but as it gets further out, you have to put some around at different spots on the edge. Now I'm just going to get comfortable because this is it takes a while. I'm going to speed this up so you can see how it so you don't have to watch the whole thing. But so this is the video at 20 times speed, and I'm just blending those colors as I go, just really keeping the brush sort of in place and letting the turntable do the work. That was quick, huh? Wish the turntable could spin that fast, but it doesn't. Alright, so far so good. Now I've actually let this dry a little bit, and I've got a black acrylic paint marker, and I want to put a border around this because, as I said, this is going to be a sun mandala. So easiest way to get a nice smooth round border on here is just hold that marker down and let it work. I'm going to jump right into drawing here, putting my sun rays on the sides. I'm using the dial technique. That's what I heard it was called. I heard Rachel of Rachel's Rocks call it the dial technique. If you want to see some really great tutorials on rock painting, go to YouTube and look up Rachel's Rocks. She's in Canada and she's fantastic. I can't do much of what she does, but I don't know if I can. I guess I do a lot of different things, although I still learn from watching her just because she has such a great teaching style as well, and she demonstrates everything. So I'm just drawing in. This is all, just freestyle. None of this ever ends up perfect, but the dial technique when you draw those rays is essentially you draw one at 12 o'clock, one at 6 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 9 o'clock, and then you put one exactly in the middle of those, and you end up with an even number of rays, and fairly evenly spaced as long as you've drawn them approximately the same size. Now I'm kind of thinking as I go here, so if you see me pausing and maybe second guessing myself sometimes. Now this is all about whatever you think is going to look good. So I'm just kind of eyeballing this thing, and I'm thinking about what I want it to look like. And I like working without a drawn design or anything to go by, because it really forces me to be creative. I've been reading a lot about art and painting and sculpture and just painting in general, or art in general. Came across this great story about the famous sculptor Donatello, the Italian sculptor. And there was a time in his life when he went to Pisa to create a series of sculptures, and the people there were blown away. They loved his work. They thought he was fantastic. They were praising him like to no end. And after not too long, he got a little bit tired of it, so he went back to Florence, and so he was asked, you know, why would you leave where you were so obviously loved so well for your work? And he said the reason was that he was afraid that if he stayed there where everybody was always praising him, he would get lazy, and that he would be too complacent, you know, with his work. So he went back to Florence, big city where there was no end of critics, I guess, in that day, no matter how good you were, because he was a master sculptor. However, I guess critics abounded even for master sculptors of the day. So, you know, he said the constant blame forced him to study and consequently to do even greater achievements. So I find that interesting. It's all about perspective, you know. So when you're doing this creative process, yeah, definitely go online or look at other designs that you like and get ideas, and be inspired by them, and then do something, you know, that you like, and don't worry if it's not 100% an original idea, because it's really hard to come up with something just straight out of your brain that's not somehow related to something else. For me, it's always easy-ish to do mandalas and sun designs, and I find them simple. That, you know, they're essentially a radial pattern. Also, flower designs. They're endlessly beautiful, but they also are similar in many respects with the petals and the rays that come out from the sun. And so once you start working, if you just go step by step, it actually is kind of relaxing. I find very little stress in doing this type of painting. And if you get the colors right, that can be the challenge. If you get the colors right, it can end up being really beautiful. I struggle with that a lot because the colors, for me, I'm colorblind in some color spectrums, so I have to just sometimes guess at what I'm seeing, or, you know, it might look like something to me, it might be look totally different to someone else. But I keep plugging away at it, and I figure if I enjoy it, then at least I had a good time making it. So I'm just adding in some detail here. Now I'm going to go back in a bit here, and I'm going to add in some color, some more of those beautiful metallic acrylic paints that I have there. I'm going to add those in, color in some of these areas here, and then I'm going to go back and I'm going to add some puffy paint, some dot work, maybe even some gold glitter paint. Let's see how it looks. Looking kind of like a compass rose at the moment. You really can't make a mistake on these. If you do, you can always fix them. You can always paint over them. Nobody knows what it was supposed to look like. They only see what it looks like at the end. A good example, if you go on Facebook or on Instagram and look at one of my rocks called Emerald Dream, it's using some of these same metallic paints by Jaquard. And when I was working on it, I thought, this does not look anything like what I thought it was going to look like. I thought it was going to be primarily bluish. It turned out to be mostly greenish. And I was just not liking it at all. And then I continued working at it, making some minor modifications, adding in layers, this type of thing. And at the end of the day, I was still kind of ambivalent about how it looked. But I set it aside for a couple days. I posted a picture online and I set it aside, and then I came back to it after a few days of not looking at it. And in the meanwhile, I had gotten quite a few nice comments about it on Facebook and on Instagram. And so I looked at it with a new mindset, and now I like it. So, you know, sometimes it's just perspective. It's easy to get a little tunnel visioned when you're working on something. So you got to step back sometimes and look at it from a distance. Now, if you watch what I'm doing here, I'm making a radial pattern inside this circle in the center, and my marker actually had a big malfunction there. You can see there's one line that's way too fat. And it's right on top of that blended gold that I did at the beginning. So now I've got to come up with some way to try to make it look like it wasn't a mistake. And I left this in the video because I wanted to show that, you know, these processes aren't always easy. So now I've got a real mess because the marker messed up again and dropped out a bunch of paint. So now back to the drawing board. I'm going to make the center black. Spread around some of that excess paint that came out of my marker. No worries. Just swerve around the obstacle and move on, right? So I'm going to paint in this circle with black, and then I'll just, you know, do something with some of that gold paint afterwards to finish it off. Easy day, right? I think it'll still look good, and no one will ever know. Well, now they will, because now they can watch it in the video and they'll go, that was a mistake that Joe made. Trust me, I own them all. I've made many mistakes. Comes right down to it. Now this is the gold acrylic paint. That is not puffy paint. That is actually a lot more fluid than puffy paint. So what I'm doing here is I'm trying to get it to come out very circular and very symmetrical, but sometimes you gotta use extraordinary measures. So I'm going to use this dotting tool, because this is it's a really thick drop of paint. So I'm going to use a dotting tool with kind of a fine tip just to move that paint around and try to even out the edges of it. Not too bad, but that's going to take a long time to dry. So meanwhile, what can I do? The good thing about working on these radial patterns is that as long as you're working from the center out, you don't necessarily need to wait for all your paint to dry. Yeah, that's still not quite circular. When you're working from the center outward, you can work pretty safely without worrying about messing up the wet paint. Always test your puffy paint before you use it. It doesn't always come out smoothly. Put some dots, and look at that. It still came out incorrectly. Again, a mistake is just an opportunity to learn. Speaking of wet paint, I read a story about Mark Twain. He was visiting the studio of a famous painter. And as he was walking around, you know, remarking on some of the paintings, he reached out to touch one, and the artist, which his name was Whistler, a famous painter of the day, suddenly stopped and said, "Hey, don't touch that, it's still wet." To which Mark Twain replied, "That's okay, I'm wearing gloves." I don't know why that cracks me up. So again, now I'm adding in a little bit of glitter paint right in the center, because I want to have, with that dark background now, so this is where a happy accident could turn out to be good. So I had to make that black dark background. So now I'm putting a lot of gold, little gold sun pattern in the center, and then some gold glitter paint, and now some light blue puffy paint around the edge of it, just to give it a nice contrast. And when I've been doing these gold rocks for a couple of months now, and for some reason blue looks really good with them. If it looks like I'm moving really fast, it's because this video is sped up about 8 times normal speed, something like that. Maybe it's 4 times. So again, I'm thinking as I go and just trying to come up with, just doing this on the fly. It's like building the airplane as you're flying it. Making color choices, design choices. I love this metallic gold puffy paint. This one I got at Hobby Lobby, and it really does look like liquid metal, this particular one. And it's a really nice shiny gold. Okay, continuing on here with more puffy paint. And this paint is actually not puffy paint. This is the acrylic metallic Lumiere paint, and I'm using that little dotting tool really just to move it around sort of in a precise manner, because I find it really difficult to use a brush in some of these very small confined areas. And so I was experimenting with the dotting tool just as a way of, so I put a dot in the center of the shape, and then I go back and I just push the paint into the area where I want, and it really works well. You can get right up to the edge of the outline, the black outline there, without going over if you're pretty careful. And this paint is thick enough that you know, like I say, you can dot it kind of in the center of your shape, like I'm doing right here. I'm just kind of filling in generally in the shape, and then I use the dotting tool, just move it around, go right up to the edge. And this is a dotting tool with a really tiny tip on it, so you're able to get right up into the corners of some of those shapes, where if I was using a paintbrush, I would probably go over the edge. I would mess it up. I'd have to go back and I'd have to repaint the black outlines. And you know, sometimes I still have to do that a little bit with this, but I found that this is a really easy way to do those fills, those color fills, and make them look pretty precise, even though the paint is really nice and thick. Look at that beautiful kind of violet pink color, and it's metallic, so it's going to have a nice shine to it when it's done, especially once you get the clear sealer on the top. And again, working from the center outward here. So if you're wondering why I was using that gold earlier and then I went back to it, why didn't I just do all the gold at once? Well, the real reason is because I don't want to get my hands in the wet paint. So if you work from the center out, you just avoid that. And I tend to rest my hands both on the desk and on the rock a lot, because my hands will shake otherwise. And when you're doing some of this really detailed work, you want to have your hands pretty steady, and my hands are notoriously not very steady. So I just like to rest them on the surface there and keep them propped up. Not quite ready for that. Put some more glitter. Now this gold glitter puffy paint, it looks kind of white when it goes on, almost like Elmer's glue or something. And that's because when it it kind of is like glue, but when it dries, the white becomes clear, and then the glitter that's trapped in the liquid shines through really nicely. It's actually fun to watch. When I put the rock in front of the fan, I'll sometimes sit there and watch it. After a few minutes, that white opaqueness starts to become you know, more clear, and you can see the glitter start to happen, and it's really kind of fun to watch the transformation of the rock. Putting some small black dots around here. This metallic green that I used on the outside of the base coat, really smooth and silky looking now. So it's going to contrast well with this dark black color of puffy paint. I keep shaking it, making sure that the paint is staying down near the tip of the nozzle, because if you get an air bubble in there, oh, it can be ugly. It'll often just kind of splatter out like a and so you got to make sure every so often, especially if you're doing a lot of dots and big dots like this, you got to shake it down and get the paint into the tip of the nozzle. Okay, it's looking pretty good. What else can we do right now? Like this dark blue, and I want to bring the blue out toward the edge more, because I have some blue in the center there. So just for balance and to integrate the design a little bit, I'm going to put some of this darker blue near the outside. this nice, very light gold color that I'm going to use to kind of highlight the rays of the sun shape here. There definitely is some practice involved when you're painting with puffy paints and you're using it in this fashion where you're dragging it. You have to kind of develop a technique for keeping the right amount of pressure as you drag the bottle across the surface. Otherwise you can really screw it up. It can look really bad, it can be real lumpy, but I've been practicing, so I can do it fairly well now. If you ever want to see people who can draw these type of designs using a similar type tip, but it's a different applicator, look up anyone doing videos of henna. It's almost like a tattoo art, but it's temporary. But if you watch henna drawing on people's hands or arms or whatever, really amazing. So that's what I got right now. I'm going to let this dry, and then I'm going to do some finishing touches to it. So now it's been drying for overnight. Just adding in some little details here. Some light blue around the edge here, right close by where I put that darker blue. And again, that mirrors some of the coloring in the middle. Now, I let that dry, time for the sealer. So I've got the Krylon triple thick clear glaze, and this, I think this is one of the best clear glazes I've used. So the goal here is to give it an initial coat. That dry rock that you see me painting on the side there looks, it takes a lot of clear coat because the rock, is kind of porous. It sucks it up a little bit. So I'm going to put that coat on, and then I'll come back later and I will finish it off with another coat. Thanks for watching.